Protection breaks down and time runs out. Down goes Rodgers and the sack for Leonard Floyd. New this year, and after spending 3 years with the Rams, the former first-round pick of the Bears, and now Rodgers sits down. A loss of 10 on the play, and hopefully the Jets are thinking that's the only loss on that play. See what happened at the end of it.
Take a look here at the very end, and hard to see. Of course, he had the calf issue in training camp, but here's a little better look as far as what might have happened for him to go back down to the ground.
And he's coming out of the game. And that means that a few plays into game one, Zach Wilson, the former number 2 overall pick from BYU, who's made 22 starts in the NFL, has thrown 15 touchdowns, 18 picks.
Oh, gross. Monday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers waiting for official word, but it sure looks like he could be out for the season with an Achilles injury. Man, oh man, the Jets win that game. It was just a really, kind of ugly game, but like an emotional roller coaster game. Tommy Castor alongside me here. I'm Jacob Albracht. Jad Chambers producing, getting that audio for us. We appreciate it, Jad. It just is the most deflating thing. Like, injuries happen all the time, but come on now. Like, this is the story of the season in the NFL, and we get 4 plays of it. My God. Like, you want to talk about, like, the camera work last night, just getting visceral reactions from everyone, and, man, that sucks. Welcome into Sports Daily here. I'm Jacob Albracht. Your calls, your reactions on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240 is that number to call. IHOP brings us that where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options. You can also find us on our video stream. Leave your comments there. You'll find that on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Tommy, that was brutal last night.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's another example of, such a high and then such a low for Jets fans. Watching Aaron Rodgers run out of the tunnel with the American flag on the anniversary of 9/11, and you built your franchise around him. You feel like you've got finally your franchise quarterback. You've built the team around him. They've been on Hard Knocks. You feel like they're going all in, and then 4 plays in, he goes down. And you mentioned potentially done for the season. It wouldn't surprise me if the guy's done for good. I mean, and I know we'll get into it and talk about it, but man, I'm not sure that you could have a more brutal start to a tenure as a quarterback for a new football team than what happened to Aaron Rodgers last night.
Yeah, that's it was no bueno, and it really did deflate the night. But credit to the Jets, and it's what's so. I'm not even a Jets fan, and I get so frustrated for them because this roster is unbelievable. In that draft class they had last year, we're going to look back at that draft class as one of the all-time greats between Sauce Gardner. I don't even remember the safety who had like 3 picks name. Breece Hall, obviously. Garrett Wilson. It's just incredible to watch those guys play. And now what do the Jets do? I don't know. This will be a really interesting, next couple of days with Rodgers, because does he try to come back from an Achilles? We need to know that. I know everybody's like, what are the contingency plans for the Jets today? Well, first and foremost, I got to know, is Rodgers going to try to come back from this next year? How much of a Band-Aid do we even need? And I think that, there's about 1,000 backup quarterbacks they could definitely inquire on across the league. And quite frankly, Tommy, probably be pretty aggressive in trading to go get somebody. Where's Jacoby Brissett, right, when you need him, or Jameis Winston when you need one of these journeymen who can do it, because Garrett Wilson just doesn't do enough. I mean, Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson doesn't do enough. Garrett Wilson's incredible. That catch was unbelievable last night. But, credit to them. you love Robert Saleh. They were, they held through. I guess, I haven't watched Hard Knocks, but the punt return story was awesome too. And, Buffalo couldn't get it done either, Tommy. And that's sort of a storyline too. But it all gets overshadowed, of course, by Aaron Rodgers and this injury. And, we shouldn't just assume that, Tom Brady's situation is universal. Like Aaron Rodgers is almost 40 years old, and the calf injury is a bit of a red flag for an Achilles anyway. And, I saw stuff this morning, like, is the field to blame? No, like nothing's to blame. It was just like a weird angle, and the Achilles is an injury. I mean, that's not that, it's not that wild to imagine. It just sucks.
It was the sum of all parts. I mean, it sounds like that the play was designed for a quick pass, and Rodgers held onto the ball a little bit longer than I think what he was supposed to. But then you've got the offensive lineman that didn't really block particularly well. And then, I do think that there is an argument that can be made that, the turf contributed to it. I don't think the turf was necessarily the reason why, but I think contributed to it. I mean, you don't have that give like you would on grass to be able to get your foot out from underneath something. Artificial turf is not going anywhere. And when you watch the replay, I mean, you can see that cleat digging into the artificial turf, and then there's nowhere for it to go. And then you can just kind of see that Achilles tendon just kind of pop right there. And so, it was just kind of the sum of all parts, and a terrible way, again, for everything to start for Aaron Rodgers with New York. As far as the quarterback play is concerned, it sounds like the Jets are going to go with Zach Wilson. I mean, what other choice do they have right now? They play
in the short term, sure.
They play against Dallas on Sunday. And so you can't, I don't know if you can really go and sign or trade for a quarterback on Tuesday and have them ready to go for Sunday. So they're going to roll with Zach Wilson. But I mean, to your point, there are a lot of quarterbacks out there. Joe Flacco wants to continue to play. He was interviewed, I think, last week saying that he would love to find a team to latch onto. Andy Dalton is out there somewhere. And then the big elephant in the room, could the Jets call Tom Brady? There are, there's a little bit of speculation that they could at least give him a call to see if he's interested in coming out of retirement to play for them. I have no idea how likely that is, but, certainly that injury overshadows a lot of other storylines in the game. You mentioned the interceptions. Jordan Whitehead had a great game picking off Josh Allen 3 times. Xavier Gibson and the punt return was incredible. The fact that the Bills fall to 0-1 and the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs all lost in their opening game. There's a lot of different narratives and storylines coming out of this game last night. But yeah, to your point, and obviously so, it's all overshadowed by what happened to Aaron Rodgers.
Well, and look, we're going to talk about, the Bills angle and the Chiefs and we're the other big headline yesterday, obviously Chris Jones. We're getting into all of that throughout the show. We have Dan Israel this morning joining us, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. So we'll get into all of that. But, the immediate aftermath, the topical thing is Rodgers. And Jad's got some audio here of, people after the game with the Jets talking, so imagine this, what you'll hear here is after, the excitement of the way they won that game. And then they got to come talk about Aaron Rodgers. Here's some of that audio.
All right. I'll deal with the quarterback real quick. Concerned with his Achilles. MRI is probably going to confirm what we think is already going to happen. So prayers tonight, but it's not good.
I was just saying, basically, the league is better when Aaron Rodgers is on the field. And, it's just bad that he went down so early. The people didn't really get to see what we've been working on, this whole time. So it's just how the ball rolls sometimes.
I hate to see it. I said my prayer for him, and it's kind of like I got to roll now. And that's just the reality of the game we play. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't lingering in the back of my head the whole time. And as soon as I came in for halftime, I made sure to check on my dog. And it's something you hate to see as a competitor, knowing how much we put into this to be able to perform, not at practice, but perform for the game. So seeing him go down, this first game so quickly in, it sucks, man. And I'm gonna keep him in my prayers. This sucks.
It does. So the order of guys you heard there was Robert Saleh clearly there at first, and then Dalvin Cook and Garrett Wilson. They've got a season to play, Tommy, and they're really good. I agree with you, Tom Brady is the first call to make, just to see. I would be concerned a little bit if I were Tom Brady because of that offensive line. And that's probably what would keep me away if I were Brady. But at the same time, it's undeniable how talented this team is and how good they are defensively. If they can piece it together on the line. They just beat the Bills last night without Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers never played. No, it was ugly, but look, you can win with defense in this league. The Jets did it last year. So, they just have to be I don't know what you do, because again, like the most immediate thing is what is Rodgers next year, and that helps decide like what to do, right? And man, like, should they have been in the the Trey Lance business? That would be an interesting dynamic. And of course, you're not thinking about this stuff. And Zach Wilson, I'm not in the camp to say Zach Wilson needs to be done. I mean, I'm fine rolling with Zach Wilson, but I would like to see, again, one of the journeyman types. Andy Dalton would be perfect for this team. Like, you brought his name up. If you can get Andy Dalton to come back up, Zach Wilson, I feel decent about that. But we'll see. We'll see what they do. That's know
what
that
they have
good.
to do. Like, they've got to go and get, I think, either in free agency or make a trade, a veteran quarterback for no other reason than to just back up Zach Wilson. Because, I don't think that you go out and you get Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston or you call Matt Ryan to come out of the booth or whoever it is. No. I don't think that any of those guys are going to be able to come in and start for this team and you feel good about their chances if you do that. I think if you call them to come in and back up Zach Wilson and fill in for him, take some pressure off of his shoulders, I think that will help a little bit. I mean, the problem with what's going to happen moving forward with the Jets is, and we've seen this from Zach Wilson throughout the course of his short NFL career, is that they're going to have a really hard time playing from behind. They just are, like, moving forward. That team is built with defense and the running back position with Breece Hall. Now that you don't have Aaron Rodgers in the picture, that's the way the team is constructed. So the hope is that you can get out in front and then lean on your running game with Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook and your solid defense to try to, get victories that way. But if this team falls behind, I don't think anybody trusts Zach Wilson to try to lead a team back, from behind. So that's really where the issue is going to land. Yeah.
He looked really bad. And you need two things out of their quarterback based on what we saw last year and last night. You need a quarterback that's not going to turn the ball over. And you need a quarterback that has the physical ability to give Garrett Wilson a chance. I'm not sure Zach Wilson can do either of those things. And that's the problem for me. Like, they don't, because their defense is so good and because their running game is going to be so good, you just need a quarterback that doesn't turn it over and can keep a defense honest / give Garrett Wilson a chance on, 4 or 5 balls a game to go be the receiver that he is. Right. Here's the other thing. It's so deflating last night, but you get the other, like, overwhelmingly positive news, and especially for us around here with Breece Hall, Jad's got some cut there. How about, the return for Breece the Beast? I think we have that call. Jad, do we have the Breece audio?
After the Jets just picked off a long pass of Allen, back at the 4, 1st and 10. Handoff here and a burst by Hall. He runs on the numbers, the 10, the 20. It's a foot race, 30 up the middle, the 40, across the logo, 50. Foot race to the 40, far side 30, far sideline 20, 15, and knocked out of bounds at the Buffalo Bill 13-yard line. Galloping downfield, the burst of 83. 1st and 10 Jets at the Bills 13.
Wow. This kid was electric when he got going last year, coming off the ACL. We didn't know how much he touched the football. Man, his first 2 touches have both been big plays. You see the explosion and the speed. Man, that's huge.
That was huge. I don't know if you saw the edit there of Eli Manning, like, immediately. Oh, he's out of shape. Like, it was really funny. But it was good. I'll tell you this, Tommy, I'm really, really glad the Jets brought in Dalvin Cook because they're going to have to run the ball. And I just, like, it would be nice if they could ease Breece in here for the first few weeks. So I'm glad they have Dalvin Cook. I'm sure they are too. But man, oh man, just a wild return for him.
Yeah, moving forward, I mean, they're going to have to be a ball control team. That's really the only way that the Jets, I think, have a chance here because their defense is really, really good. I mean, when you've got Sauce Gardner and then, man, Jordan Whitehead with those 3 interceptions and then, everybody else they've got on that defensive unit, they are a solid defense. And with the two-headed monster, Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook, if you can supplement your running game with a handful of good passes to guys like Garrett Wilson and others. Alan Lazard is on that team. I mean, I think you still don't feel great about their chances not having Aaron Rodgers, but at least you know that it's not just Rodgers. Like he wasn't the only talent that they had on the team. Brees Hall looked incredible, and that they're going to need him. They're going to need to lean on him. And same thing with Dalvin Cook. So it was great to see, Brees Hall coming back from that injury in such an effective way. And by the way, can I just mention Kevin Harlan is the best broadcaster on the face of the planet. I mean, there's not anybody better than him.
I agree. I agree. I get so excited to hear Kevin Harlan here with us on KFH when he calls these games. And I'm glad he's on radio too. He's incredible at football as well, but man, he's great at both. I agree with you. He's the man. What a cool debut back for Brees, and he is going to be a focal point this year. And we pray for his good health because he's a superstar. He is so dadgum good, and he's going to put it on display this year. And so is Garrett Wilson. Tommy, I'm not sure. I would Justin Jefferson is the top young guy. Tyreek Hill may be the top guy in general. But man, Garrett Wilson is so good. And I just I don't want to happen to him what's happened to so many, great young receivers that he never gets a chance to play with a really good quarterback because he is unreal good. All right. Let's give one of our prizes away here today. So we've got lots of things to give away today, including movie tickets, HTO, maybe some WinSurge vouchers. We'll do all of it. Let's start with the movie vouchers, Jad. So we've got tickets to a special screening of the animated feature Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie. My kids are excited about this one. That's Thursday, September 28th at 7 o'clock at Boulevard Theater in Town West. Keep the kids up late that night. Again, special screening, Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie, Thursday, September 28th, 7 o'clock. We'll give away a pair of tickets here to that. Right now, to our second caller during the break on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. When we come back, Chiefs news, Chris Jones. There's a lot to dig into with that as well. It is a headline edition of Sports Daily today on a Tuesday. Albracht and Castor will be right back. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. Congratulations to Mark, headed to see Paw Patrol on us. We'll give away some HTO, some Wind Surge vouchers as well. Final homestand for the Wind Surge of the regular season begins tonight. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here. We have Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, coming up at the top of the hour. Looking forward to the conversation with him about a lot of things. One of which was the big news yesterday. Came down, I don't know, about 4:30. Chris Jones and the Chiefs, well, they're in agreement on a one-year deal. My instant reaction, Tommy, is I'm glad he's back. I'm glad this, finally got done and situated and everything else. My secondary reaction is Chris Jones needs to have a very serious conversation with his representation. So Ian Rappaport reports this morning that it's a one-year deal worth up to $25 million. The base of 19.5, which is what he was playing for, is the same, but he's got a chance now to make up the fines that he got for sitting out and I guess a little bit more with some incentives. And then he'll be a free agent at the end of the season anyway, and the Chiefs can still use the franchise tag. All of this drama for the opportunity to make back the money you've lost by holding out, plus another, I suppose, $5 million. He didn't get to the number on a long-term deal. He didn't get to the number on a short-term deal. And he gained nothing in the franchise tag / free agency price. He literally gained nothing.
And by the way, don't forget, he won't get a chance to negotiate a long-term contract until his age 30 season. So the age 29 season that he's in right now, he didn't get a long-term deal done. He'll have to wait another season when he's actually a free agent to negotiate with 32 teams in the NFL to try to get the number that he wants, but he'll be a year older. And so there's no way that number will be accomplished. I mean, I don't know what he got out of this that was
the
positive.
Opportunity to make $5 million more only based on incentives. It's not guaranteed more. He didn't get anything guaranteed.
And I wonder if, that's worth it for everything that transpired over the last couple of months. The fact that now you've got a section of the fan base that, probably look at him in a little different light than they did before. Not that, they're not going to welcome him back with open arms, because I guarantee you that when he comes out on the field on Sunday, the entire fan base is going to be like, thank God we've got 95 back out there. But also at the same time, and I've got a really hard time believing that any kind of long-term deal will be taken care of after this season between these two teams.
He's not really going to there's nothing else for him to prove with the Chiefs. He's not going to play better than he played last year. So, I mean, because he's already great, right? Yeah. His problem is he's older and he's already had a big deal. So like this long-term deal for him, I don't think is there anyway. I just like, it's been a little while, and, we talked to Dan Israel last week, and he was just like, I don't understand what the point of this is. And it's been to that point for me for a long time, because like the Chiefs aren't going to do anything here. Like at some point, Chris Jones just has to decide. And that's clearly what happened. He looked very uncomfortable in the opener and, that camera shot and everything else. Like I think that he felt very uncomfortable at the charity event when he talked. I don't think he likes this perception that he's hurting his team, which he clearly is. Whether he is intending to, obviously he's not intending to. I think that all of these things combined, Chris Jones is finally like, let's just be done with this. Like this isn't accomplishing anything. It's probably making him very unhappy. And so again, I'm really glad he's back, because I think this will be really good for the Chiefs. I think it's good to get that out of the way. I think it's going to be a little shot in the arm, I think. And, for a defense that actually looked pretty good in the opener, it's going to make the defense better, which is great, because there's more questions on the offense perhaps than we realized. But man, like, we got to have a serious talk with my representation, because they had such a bad idea of leverage. Like, they need to go back to school on leverage, because they never had any. It was pretty obvious that they never had any. And they tried to do this, and they cost their client a lot of money, potentially.
And a lot of goodwill, I think, in the eyes of the organization and the fan base. And also keep in mind that really you look at the historical nature of the way that Brett Veach, and we've talked about it before, has dealt with other players around the same stature of Chris Jones, Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, Tyreek Hill. And I don't know at what point the Katz brothers looked at this situation and said, oh yeah, it's different. Like our client is different than those other guys. And we're going to be able to get what we want out of the Chiefs. That's not really the way that it works. I would say that the only part from the Chiefs perspective that after week one maybe drove a little bit more urgency from their perspective on at least getting a 1-year deal done and getting him back out on the field is the fact that there are other pressing issues now that the Chiefs have to work through and figure out outside of Chris Jones. So I can imagine that there might have been a scenario where Brett Veach and Andy Reid and the coaching staff in the front office said, okay, after that opening loss against the Lions, is there any way we can get Chris Jones done for right now so we can get that off of our plate and focus on some of the other things that we have going on? That might be the only, and again, that doesn't mean that like they lost any kind of leverage or that they gave up anything that they didn't give up anything at all. Like they were in the position of strength all along. But I do think that there could have been a conversation saying, hey, we've got other things to focus on, wide receivers and Travis Kelce's injury and other things like that. Let's get this drama off the table and at least get him signed for this season.
Rick chimes in on the video stream and says, this is the Chiefs and Jones parting ways at the end of this season. KC won't give him a long-term deal. Look, I don't think it's that cut and dry, but they're not going to give him what he thought he was going to get. I mean, I can say that. I don't think it's necessarily, that'll be up to Chris Jones. But the Chiefs didn't give. You don't think the Chiefs 6 months ago would have been like, well, yeah, we'll do a 1-year deal incentive based for 25 instead of 20? Sure.
Absolutely.
Like what?
Sure.
On a 1-year deal, we lose nothing. We literally lose nothing. We got to pay you an extra $5 million if you're awesome this year. Yeah, okay. We'll do that. We don't lose any free agency. We can still tag you next year, like all these things.
Right.
We don't lose anything here.
That's the biggest thing in that contract that my jaw dropped when I read the details of the contract is that the Katz brothers couldn't even negotiate in not the Chiefs not being able to tag Chris Jones after this year. They can still tag him. Like, that's just wild to me. Like, if you're going to sign a 1-year deal that's incentive laden, you got to try to negotiate in some kind of clause in there saying the Chiefs cannot tag you at the end of the season. They couldn't even get that accomplished. So I think that it's fairly likely. It wouldn't shock me one bit if they tag him after this season and then try to trade him. Like you do the tag and trade type thing. Like I think that at that point, because then you can get that draft capital value back for him. You've got him under the franchise tag. There are teams that I think would trade for him at that point. It just is mind-boggling that they couldn't negotiate in getting rid of that franchise tag.
I think the Chiefs will be very willing if the time comes and it's there to say, look, man, like I'm sorry that happened that way. I mean, Tom, you say the tag part. They got him a raise that's not even guaranteed to be a raise. Like the way this is, and I don't know, like I always think, and you guys probably know this because I talk about it too much, but like the way this is reported is really interesting to me. Like Rappaport and like, the reporters that get all the scoops and everything, like I tell you guys, like a lot of the time this information comes straight from agents, right? Straight from agents, all this stuff. But like these presentations of the way this is like, is being celebrated for Chris Jones. The holdout's over. He finally got his deal. He didn't get anything. He didn't get anything. He got the opportunity to go get an incentive raise to make back the money he already lost.
And Adam Schefter, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, reported that Chris Jones has the potential to make substantially more money this year than last year. Okay, how much of that money?
What's a 25% bump? Like,
but let me finish. How much of that money will have to go to the fines that he had to pay throughout the course? Like, it offsets that, so like, is he actually netting much more money than he made last year? No, he's not. And he's got to hit incentives to actually be able to get any of that. So I don't see this being a win at all for Chris Jones, except for the fact that he gets back on the field. Except
yeah.
for the fact that he
From
gets
a
an opportunity to
football
rejoin his
perspective.
teammates. It's a win for him because he doesn't have to set up in a suite looking goofy with 2 wannabe Sopranos members flanking him on either side. He gets a chance to actually get back out on the field and play with his team and rejoin his teammates. That's good for him. But from a financial point of view, this is a huge L for Chris Jones.
It's a business L, but it's probably a real big like life win for Chris Jones. And look, we all make dumb business decisions, right? We all misplay our hands from time to time, like for real. We've all done it 1,000 times. So we're just like observing a situation more like I'm not casting stones at Chris Jones here because he was given bad information, by people, and they just absolutely misplayed this. And it's been the thing for me, Tommy, is like you could see this coming from OTAs. Like it never made sense what was like, okay, Chris Jones is sitting out OTAs and we're being told, and it's being reported again by, I think, the same people, that they're just waiting on, the Simmons and the Quinnen Williams deals to set the market. Okay. That's what we're waiting on. But if that's what we're waiting on, the Chiefs can't control that. So why is he holding out? That never made sense to me. But okay, those deals get done and it means nothing because they misplayed their hand from the beginning. They said, this is what we want. The Chiefs said, no, that's not the market. They let this come out. The Chiefs were right. And they were like, well, you still want this much. And they're like, no, like we're not doing that. And so then it's like, okay, well, we're going to hold out. And the Chiefs are like, okay, hold out. Like, that's not the market. We're not going to do it. We're telling you right now, we're not going to do it. And like, okay, well, we're going to hold out. You just wait and watch. Okay, sounds good. Hold out, hold out, hold out. Chris Jones is miserable. By the way, it's very apparent that he's not happy. And not, I don't mean just like from the deal, like emotionally, it doesn't seem like he's like the same jovial Chris Jones. So we get to all this point. We see the first week. Defense looks all right. Like all these things are happening. And it's like, what are we waiting for here? Well, here's what we got for you, Chris. You know all that money you lost in fines? We're going to get you the opportunity to make that back. We can't guarantee you that you'll get it back, but boy, if you're really good, you can at least get back what you lost and a couple million more. And oh, by the way, nothing changes long-term. They can still tag you. You'll still have to be a free agent. We didn't get you a long-term deal. Let's get a hold of these guys and, hey, everybody, we got the Chris Jones deal done. We finally got it done. But the reality is, like, you didn't get anything done. Like, what was accomplished here? You get the opportunity to make back the money you lost in holding out, and that's about it. Because if you do the math, Tommy, on the net, right? Okay, it's 25 million. Like, he's incentive-based to 25 million. He was already at 19.5. What did he lose now? $1 million for the first game? Yeah, 3.
It's like a
plus
total
the
of 3.
preseason and offseason.
Yeah.
So you're down to 16.5.
Right.
So if you gained 5 and you've lost 3, there's maybe $2 million net dollars that he can gain by having a good year. Maybe. Right. And so it's like, are you kidding me? And I've had to, upset the fan base. I've had to let down my coaches. I've had to, it kind of feels like in a way, let down some of my teammates here. Not that they're holding it against him to do it, but I think if you heard Travis Kelce, it's like everybody on the planet was reading the room one way, and Chris Jones's people. And if you weren't reading it that way in OTAs, you were reading it that way now, except the representation. And they finally were like, and now that, oh my God, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah. And you're a year older when you enter free agency.
Well, that was going to happen anyway.
I know, but they were trying to get a long-term deal done in the year 29 age. Now he's going to be 30 when he's going to get a chance to actually negotiate it again. On top of all of that, too, you watch week 1 from a suite at Arrowhead, and you see the defense played pretty well without you out there. You see a defense give up 14 points to a Detroit offense that is fairly high powered. And so any kind of leverage there, I think, was gone. I mean, it might have been slightly different. I still think the Chiefs would have stuck to their guns and held on, even if it had been a disaster. defensively in week 1. But still, if you're there and you're watching from above, the defense just get absolutely shredded, drive in and drive out by Jared Goff and the Lions. Then at that point, you could go back if you're the representation and at least publicly say, clearly my client is needed down there. Clearly it's a situation where the Chiefs have to have him if they want to win football games, but that wasn't the case. The defense looked okay. That was the least of the Chiefs' problems in that opening game. So any kind of, I guess, perceived leverage there goes out the window too after week 1. So there was literally nothing to stand on if you are Chris Jones's representation. And I think that this deal clearly signifies the fact that they realized finally we've got nothing here that we can go off of.
Well, and I think too, like it was probably Chris Jones saying, listen, I'm done with this.
This is done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Because, and I actually do think the Chiefs need him. I think they need him
too,
to win a Super
but
Bowl
in a negotiation leverage type thing.
Oh no,
there was
that's been the
you
case.
You can't point at that game and say, look right there.
Yeah, no.
That's you got to have
the
it.
Case
like,
we've been having this conversation, Tommy, for 4 months, 5 months. Like, do the Chiefs have to have Chris Jones to win a Super Bowl? No.
Don't you think that there was a thought from the Katz brothers that, all right, we're going to take our client up to the suite and we're going to watch this defense get shredded, and then the Chiefs are going to realize they're going to need him, and then that really wasn't the case?
I don't know what they're thinking, because I can't remember a misplayed hand like this that was so obvious and had and they had so many opportunities to like back out of misplaying it too. And it's just kept doubling down. Like, you could have backed out of this in training camp at some point and been like, man, we're not going to get this deal. Let's not pile up these fines. Let's at least see if we can get a little incentive bonus in there. Like, we don't have any leverage. We never have, because he's under contract. It's a good contract. And he's going to lose too much money by holding out. Let the lesson be learned here. Unless you play quarterback in this league, holdouts almost never benefit. Like, they almost never work in the long term or the short term, unless you're a quarterback. And when you get back to the CBA, figure out what else to do with the franchise tag, because that's what's killing these guys at a lot of levels. So, but until then, like, stop thinking that unless you play quarterback, like, teams are just like, okay, like, if we got a great quarterback, we'll go try to win anyway. Let's come back. Let's talk about the impact we think Jones will have when he comes back. We'll have Dan Israel at the top of the hour too, and then in the second hour we can revisit some of the Jets news and things that we're dealing with there. Let's do some of these win surge vouchers. So you've got just a few more opportunities here. Basically, every day, every night, tonight, starting tonight, and then through Sunday. That's it. That's the final regular season homestand for the Surge, final games of the regular season. So we're going to, give you an opportunity one last time to go see the Surge. You can get some vouchers on us right now. First caller during the break to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Tommy and I'll be back. Chris Jones is back. What does that mean for the Chiefs? We'll touch on that next. Congrats, Adam. Going to see the Wichita Wind Surge on us here at Sports Daily and KFH. Thanks for tuning in here over the airwaves, 97.5 FM, 1240 AM, on the Odyssey app, streaming for free, which you can go back and listen to shows that you missed, kfhradio.com as well. And then on our video streams, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, you can find those. Lots of ways to take in the show. We're talking Chris Jones. All right, so now that we've moved beyond, and we'll get into all of it with Dan Israel coming up in our next segment. We've moved beyond how, seemingly silly a deal it's been now that we see it and all the drama that went into it. Chris Jones coming back, Tommy. Look, I've been very on record with the fact that I don't think the Chiefs need Chris Jones to win a Super Bowl, right? Like, all things considered, which is why I never thought he had any leverage to begin with. But that doesn't mean I don't think Chris Jones is awesome and will help them win a Super Bowl potentially. I think he's one of the best defensive players in football. I hope that he's, back at full speed and ready to go right away, because I do think that they need him. I think that they did well against the Lions, but, the Lions right now have some limitations. They have one really good receiver and a lot of inexperience, everywhere else catching the ball. So I would like to see a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. Jared Goff was pretty clean in that game. That's the thing that got me. Defending the run, they did better probably than I thought they would in that game, but the Lions did run it relatively effectively, especially when they needed to. So I think they absolutely, need Chris Jones. And for me, I look at it this way, Tommy. If the offense is going to come along a little slower, and we'll see with Travis Kelce, we'll see if he practices today, and we'll talk to Dan Israel about that too. But we'll see how much the offense is slowed now once we get Kelce healthy. I don't know. Honestly, I am totally don't have a hot take on that. I got to see it. But what I can say is I was pleasantly surprised with the defense. If Chris Jones adds to that, and this becomes an above average to really good defense, that changes things too for the Chiefs. And, as we watch the AFC sort of stumble out of the gates here, that's a pretty big advantage. If they can imagine the Chiefs with a good to top in, let's say top third of the league type defense. That's an interesting development.
I said this on Friday after the game, and I know that you and Paul gave me a ton of grief for it, but I'm going to double down on it. There was not a single play defensively in the game on Thursday that it popped into my mind at all. They've got to have Chris Jones out there if they want to be successful. They're really honest to God wasn't. But I want to clarify, they will be a better defense with him on the field. They clearly will. So I'm not sitting there saying they don't need him. They shouldn't sign him. They shouldn't have him out on the field. There wasn't anything glaring to me in the opening game that I thought, man, it's a disaster without him out here. They will be improved with him on the field moving forward. I'm glad they got it done. I think that he clearly makes their defense an above average defensive unit. And if they can get to maybe a good defensive unit or a great defensive unit, then sure, that's clearly going to help them in the long run. I'm glad they got the deal done. But man, I was pleasantly surprised overall with the way that defense played without him on the field.
I was too. I would say this. Imagine Trevor Lawrence and the weapons he has with as clean a pocket as Jared Goff had in that game.
Yeah.
That's what would, that's where I think it's okay, I'm really glad we have Chris Jones back.
We did see other areas of pressure, though, away from, not having Chris Jones out on the field. We saw Karlaftis get pressure. Mike Danny got some pressure.
Cannot beat
Trent
pressure.
McDuffie got some pressure. No, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that there were other areas where it came from last week. You adding Chris Jones up the middle, man, that makes that defense look that much better.
It does, and they need it. They need it in a game like this weekend. Let's talk to Dan Israel about what he saw from the Jaguars and what he saw from the Chiefs and get his thoughts on all of this. How concerned is he about the offense? 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. It will be occupied by the executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel, who joins us for his weekly visit next on Sports Daily.
Pro football news for the Kansas City Chiefs. One of their big stars, 29-year-old defensive tackle Chris Jones, ending his holdout. Here's Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network.
Big news, massive news for the Kansas City Chiefs. The team and star defensive tackle Chris Jones have converged to end his holdout. They've agreed to terms on a new one-year deal to replace what was already on the books, so no new years added for Chris Jones. The holdout is over. The holdout that, of course, took more than $2 million away from him in fines. Also lost a game check for week 1. He has the ability to make that and more back in incentives.
Chris Jones back with the Chiefs. Minor League Baseball, the Wichita Wind Surge home tonight, starting a 6-game home series. It will wrap up the regular season. Wichita hosting Midland at 7 o'clock downtown at Riverfront Stadium. Dollar hot dog night. The Surge 1 game behind in the division with 6 games to go in the season. I'm Ted, the Sports Head.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Caught! Touchdown! Kansas City!
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, we have you covered. Joining Sports Daily Live, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel.
All right, welcome back into Sports Daily. We welcome back in Dan Israel. A lot to talk about with the Chiefs, but Dan, I'm curious, like the rest of the world last night, how deflating was that when you saw Aaron Rodgers and knowing what's probably coming later today? How deflating was that for you as just a football fan?
Yeah, this story has been building, it seems like, all off season and summer, and then just, wow. What was it, 4 plays, something like that. Shocking that, but this is the nature of the game, right? And this is one of the things that I think the Chiefs have been so incredibly fortunate at and good at when injury does bite them is to avoid injury. And then when it bites them, they've been able to rehabilitate very quickly. But this doesn't look good for Rodgers. I mean, the Achilles is the Achilles, right? There's not much they do there. It's not like it's going to be a few weeks and he's back. He's likely out for the season. And you feel for the Jets fans, man. Any kind of season-ending injury is certainly tough, but to watch it unfold when you had all this anticipation and excitement, what a story that franchise is. And then they pull out the victory out of that. It was a crazy night.
Well, and it looks like we're going to miss the opportunity more than likely to see a Rodgers and Mahomes matchup, which is unfortunate for sure. And Dan, I wonder, taking, your thoughts on that, what that means in your mind as far as how the AFC is going to play out. We know that not only did the Chiefs lose in their opening game, but so did the Bengals and the Bills. Now you've got the Jets without Aaron Rodgers. Does this change in your mind how you think that the entire conference is going to play out?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. I think one game's too small a sample size. When you talk about just 1 week out of the entire 17, I don't think, we can fully predict what's going to happen, because often when that first week can be a liar on many accounts. But, when you take a look at it, it looks as though the AFC isn't going to be as dominant as it was previous years. And so you've got what I would have said are the 3 top teams in the conference who now are all 0-1. And you've got a lot of young talent under that. The one kind of unknown was going to be the Jets when they take this incredibly strong defense that they put together, and they added in a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. And you thought, well, who knows what we'll see out of them? That doesn't appear like it's going to come to manifest as well. It may be Miami's time. Who knows? But I feel like we've got a lot of football left, and hopefully week 1 was just an outlier.
Well, I think the big question now is, was it an outlier for the Chiefs? Travis Kelce goes down late in the week. That clearly impacted the game plan, and it was hard to adjust. I wonder, from your perspective on these young receivers, the drops are one thing from Kadarius Toney, as one of the worst games we've seen from a wide receiver. But as I'm watching it, it's, Sky Moore was the part that is a little concerning to me, but I don't know. It felt like they didn't even get to him in the progressions and in the reads on very many routes until the very end of the game, which is sort of counterintuitive to what we had heard and seen in training camp in the preseason. What do you make of that? And how big a part of the offense is he going to be? And if it's not him, what are we going to do at wide receiver here?
Well, I think if they went back and you get an honest assessment out of the coaches, I think they would say, yeah, we didn't find Sky enough in that game, especially after Tony seemed to be struggling. And Mahomes admitted last night that, he left a lot of open people on the field, that he could have done a much better job of moving the ball around, which I think is what made him so exceptional last year. But I do still have big expectations of Sky Moore. The Kadarius Toney thing, you almost have to throw that outside and just say, well, he can't have a worse game than that, because, very rarely do you have a game where you can point to one or two things and say, oh, yeah, that cost us the game. And in this situation, you had three of those with Tony, right? Tony himself, let alone the rest of the team. So I do feel like there's somebody that's going to have to rise up here. You get a little bit of this post-Kelsey glimpse into the future, and it's not a pretty one, is it? We've got to have – and I did think MVS's catch way down the field in contested traffic was outstanding, maybe the best catch we've seen out of Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But the consistency isn't there yet for him to be that number one guy. And so somebody's going to have to rise up here. Everybody's going to have to play better, I think, than they played on Monday. I thought it was a very interesting game when you have your leading receiver is a running back and your leading rusher is your quarterback. That statistically, that can't be part of their game plan. So hopefully they'll come back. They'll regroup against Jacksonville, because I don't think Jacksonville is going to be any easier than what we saw out of the Detroit Lions. I thought the defense did a good job of stopping the Lions' run, which they were very adept at, and to hold them to just 14 points, I thought that was pretty impressive. But the pick six, on the tipped ball from Tony, those things, they have to eliminate those mistakes. There was just so many opportunities simply wasted. And then when you lose a game by 1 point and you look back at 5 or 6 different moments that would have been game changers, you have to realize, hey, we're a tick off here. If we just improve a little bit, we're 1-0 instead of 0-1. And you got to do that every week, because that's what the Chiefs are going to get. The best opponent every week is going to get their opponent's best effort, right?
Dan, I thought it was notable hearing from Andy Reid after the game, talking about how, he takes the blame for Kadarius Toney's performance. And I know that that's something that Andy Reid does a lot, and something that you're going to hear from coaches quite a bit when you try to kind of take the burden off of the player and put it on your shoulders. But I did think it was notable him talking about how he felt like maybe they rushed Toney into a position to be the primary receiver. Did you notice that as well? Do you think that it's a situation where, maybe Kadarius Toney, while he's got just a supreme amount of talent, just maybe isn't primary number one receiver material?
It's a great question. I would say I definitely felt like they rushed him back. I just don't feel like he had enough reps to be out there playing that at a position that was receiving as many targets as they were giving him. I do think it's a little different the way Coach Reid game plans an opponent as opposed to most teams. So most teams would come in and say, hey, this is our number one receiver. This is our number two guy. This is what we're going to do. The Reid is more, okay, who is the best target against an opponent? And they develop. So you could have Kelsey be your number one receiver one week. You could have Tony or Sky Moore be that person next week, or Pacheco, just depending on how the strategy it is. It's a little bit different, where it's not quite so structured from a 3-deep standpoint. In other words, this isn't always the way things are going to be. However, having said that, certainly Kelsey is always a paramount factor in the game plan. And when he wasn't, that certainly left an opening. I did feel like that they relied too much on Tony, or they tried to target Tony too much for the kind of night he was having and for as fewer reps as he'd had coming back off that injury. And I just feel like it was too much too soon. They should have, I agreed with Coach. He should have probably spread the ball around more in that game for sure. I don't think you'll see that going forward necessarily, because like I said, this week against Jacksonville, they may not see Tony's style as being that kind of guy that they want to target that much. It may be someone completely different, but they've got to make, in my opinion, and this is, when you start questioning Hall of Fame coaches like Coach Reid, he knows what's wrong and he's going to fix it. He doesn't need my advice. But I think one of the things that you'll see is they have to make adjustments at halftime. Tony had a bad first half. I would not have continued to try to, it's the old adage of, let's get him back up on the horse. Let's get him back up on the horse. Well, after he's fallen off the horse 4 or 5 times, broken a few legs and bones, you say, maybe we shouldn't put him on the horse yet, right? So I felt like it was just a little bit early. for week one to be targeting Tony so much. But again, I think that the error there is in not adjusting quicker in the second half, more so than saying, hey, that was a bad game plan.
Well, it was a game plan. Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, joining us. It was a game plan that had to be changed and a little bit different, right? Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, so great, out of bye weeks and all these things. It wasn't even a regular game plan. This was like one of those 2-week, very, scripted kind of game plans that had to be changed. What did we have? Was it 3 days, I think? Like, that's tough to do too.
Very much so. And it's an excellent point, because I think that, anytime you have to deal without a player, for instance, the Jets going forward, right? If Rodgers is indeed out for the season, they know that. Now they can plan around that. The problem with when you get an injury in the middle of a week to a star like that is it throws everything into chaos, everything you've been working for the past few days. And sometimes ththese games, coach plans he plans certain things out a long time in advance, and the staffs under him go to develop. They pull film, they figure out what's going on, and they come up with this concept. Here's what we're going to do. And then so you start to install that on Monday and Tuesday, and then bam, Wednesday, you don't have the guy that this is all featured around anymore. So that those quick adjustments that have to be made at last minute are definitely harder to overcome than ones that you can plan for at least a week in advance. They don't really look too far ahead down the road, anybody but coach. So I would say that, 2 weeks of notice is as good as 1 week of notice, but 3 days is not enough. It's very difficult to overcome something that significant at the last minute.
What do we know about Travis Kelce moving forward this week? It was surprising to me that, clearly that injury seemed like the Chiefs dodged a bullet there. Like I read the reporting that the Chiefs were concerned at the very outset that he had fractured the tibia plateau, I think was the words that were described there. And so knowing that they dodged that huge of a bullet, is this something where we feel confident that he's going to be able to work his way through here in the short term, like the next few days? Or will the Chiefs take it easy on him now that they know that he's going to be working back from an injury? Is this something they take slowly, or do they try to work him back as soon as possible?
I think the Chiefs have shown historically that they're just conservative. They'll work him slowly. They definitely in the mode of protecting Travis Kelce from Travis Kelce, because Kelce himself wants to be out there. He would play if they put it in a hard cast. He'd figure out some way to limp along the field. He's not the kind of guy that wants to give in to that injury, to any injury. And so, but I'm fairly certain in saying that the Chiefs are not going to rush him back, that the long-term aspects of Kelce, especially when you consider late season and postseason, let alone his future career. One of the issues you have with Travis Kelce is his age, right? He is at an age where his body is not going to continue to improve. It's going to get beat up. It's going to need more rest than normal. And as Mitch Schultes and I've talked about this at length, where, Kelce's such an important part of this mix, but it can't last forever. They have to raise up somebody to be able to spell Kelce and give him some rest. So when they do bring him back in there, I don't believe they'll bring Kelce back until he's safely able to come back. They're not going to risk worsening the problem. Once they feel that's the case, and once they feel like they've got him, I think they'll keep an eye on the swelling. I just think it'll be an inflammation issue, because bone bruises are very difficult to deal with long term. They just hurt for a long time. Kelce will play through the pain. I don't think that's a big deal, but it's the inflammation that they want to keep an eye on, because if it does inflame, then you can risk actually doing further injury.
Yeah, and so is it just, Dan, simply watch practice, reports this week? If he practices and continues to practice, we should be optimistic. Is it a pretty cut and dry one with this injury, you think?
Yeah, I think, you can tell when a player walks up a step and you walk out with the team and they're just talking to one another and they're heading to the practice field and they head up those long steps that are right outside the practice field. You can watch a player go up that. They're not thinking about their injury. They're not thinking about hiding or masking their injury. So if the trainers are paying attention, they'll see Kelce either favoring this or not. And they've certainly got medical evidence with x-rays and MRIs or whatever they do to back their opinion. But I think they'll keep an eye on him, and they think, as he gets out there and he starts to is they start to feel like he's safe to put out there, they'll put him out there and watch how that develops. So you could see a situation where he goes back into practice and he has a full day of practice and then he's out the next day due to inflammation. So I think that's going to be it. It's going to be a watch every day and just see how it goes.
Well, of course, the other major headline that came out, less than 24 hours ago, Dan, the Chris Jones deal is done. A 1-year deal that we were talking about it last hour. Just kind of crazy the way that it all came down. Incentive-laden deal. The holdout really didn't seem like it accomplished anything at all for Chris Jones. The Chiefs can still tag him after this season. Your overall thoughts on this deal and getting Chris Jones back out on the field?
Let me say first and foremost, because what a ride this has been with this story. I'm glad Chris is going to be out there. I want him out on the field, and I want him in the locker room, and I want everything to return to normal. I hope that's what happens. But for a situation that started off in the offseason in March where, hey, I want to be a Chief forever, I'm going to get this thing done, to go where it went and to have him sitting in the stands on TV on Thursday night and not a lick of red on. I mean, it's just, this story took such an arc. And then we hear this news yesterday, and it was almost like, what? All that for this? It was like no ending. It's like a movie you've sat through for 2 hours and it has no real endings. We're basically back in, we put a pause button on this thing. Chris has got the opportunity to not lose as much money as he was going to by sitting out to week 8, by playing this year on this 1-year contract. And then next year we're right back into it. They tag him or he becomes a free agent, or it's just, it's very anticlimactic, but having said all that, I'm glad he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. He's definitely going to make them better. Let's talk about then Jacksonville, because we're with you. We just spent 20 minutes I cannot believe how misplayed that hand has been for so long. But he's back now. I think there's probably a pretty good chance he plays this weekend. Based on what we saw out of the defense looked pretty good against the Lions, but Jared Goff had a pretty clean pocket. I don't think the Chiefs have any interest in leaving Trevor Lawrence, who has more weapons on offense probably than the Lions do right now, with a clean pocket like that. So the timing from that perspective seems good, right? Like we don't want Trevor Lawrence in there standing free like that with what they showed in Jacksonville in week 1.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think one of the risks that they have is if they do put Jones back out there and he's just playing kind of a third down role. I guess overall you want the Jaguars to have to at least game plan with Chris Jones. So I'm glad he's in the building, and I'm glad that the Jaguars offense has to factor in what if Chris Jones is out there, because that anytime you make things more complex for a coach, it gets more difficult. That's the intrinsic way of it, right? And so for Chris Jones to be out there, will he be out there 60 snaps? I can't imagine that, but if he's out there enough that he wreaks havoc and causes some confusion on the part of the Jaguars offensive line, I think that's a good thing, because Trevor Lawrence, I do believe, is more talented than Jared Goff. And I think if the last thing you want to do here is go 0-2. The Chiefs really need to clean up the items that they had from that week 1 outing and say, look, no, we're still championship caliber. Bring your best game, because we're going to clean it up every week. And I think that's one of the things that they've excelled at over time, is they don't let the same mistakes befall them game after game after game. They really do spend a lot of time fixing what went wrong in the previous week. So hopefully if they do that, they don't induce a bunch of new issues, they'll have a better outing this week against Jacksonville.
Dan, I really felt like even without Chris Jones out there on Thursday night, I thought the defense played pretty well. And we saw, performances from some of these guys that I feel like it's really encouraging as we move forward. I thought that George Karlaftis played with a ton of injury. Mike Dana played really well up the middle. And then Trent McDuffie, I thought, carried the secondary and really carried the defense overall. So I know adding in Chris Jones, I mean, clearly you've got that all-pro talent coming back to help the overall unit. But what did you take away from just the overall individual performances from some of those guys I just mentioned?
Yeah, I thought it was really impressive, to be honest with you, because when you looked at the depth chart and you looked behind Chris Jones, you saw guys who had been there a few years and who had opportunities in the past, albeit maybe minor ones, to make themselves into something more than they've become and didn't. And so here you had another opportunity to say, Turk Wharton, are you going to go out there and get something done? Are you going to prove that you belong in this league? Or can you prove that you're starting caliber? Mike Dana and these guys, it was an opportunity for them to really say, look, I'm not Chris Jones, but I belong in this league. And I thought they did that. I was very, very happy with the performance they had. That was not an easy Lions front. They had, they're built to run the football, and they're built to run it up the middle. And they spent a lot of time on the edge, and that was shocking to me. I probably would have tested us more up the middle than they did. But early in the game, they stood stiff enough that I felt like the Chiefs defense was strong enough that I think it discouraged them. So I was very encouraged by the defensive play. I felt like before this Chris Jones, situation kind of unraveled, I would have said the Chiefs are going to have a top 10 defense this year. And, we won a Super Bowl without that. So I think we won 2 Super Bowls without that, right? So I really felt like the defense is kind of poised. But the guys that stood up last week, I thought deserved a lot of praise. Again, 14 points to the Lions, I thought was pretty impressive. And I think all those guys really did an outstanding job in the face of what was some uncertainty, right? I mean, this Chris Jones thing, we thought once camp wrapped up, he'll get back in the building, he'll get back to work, and it didn't. And so everybody was kind of in that limbo status where they weren't sure what was going to happen. But I thought they did a good job, and hopefully they can continue that because, again, the stronger your defensive front, man, the more you got. And I think conversely for, you're looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they can do a lot more deep here. You've got to have a strong enough front to push that line back, or you're gonna leave Trevor Lawrence back there with time. He's gonna throw the ball deep on you, and it's gonna burn you.
And Calvin Ridley looks all the way back. They've got some weapons there for them. All right, Dan, it's a noon kick. We're excited about that. This game feels pretty dang big early in the season. What do you guys have coming on the broadcast for us?
It's going to be interesting. We're back to these noon starts. We haven't had a whole lot of those over the past few years, but it's going to be just nice to get back on Sundays, isn't it? And just kind of roll with the punches. Right now, we've got pretty much our standard broadcast, but we're going to hit the airwaves at 11. We'll have something for you.
All right. You can hear it on KNSS, the home of the Chiefs radio network here with our Odyssey family. Dan, we appreciate it. A lot to digest. It's been an eventful first couple of weeks of the season for the Chiefs. There's no doubt about that.
Indeed. Let's talk next week about a W. How about that?
Sounds good. Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs radio network, joining us. We always appreciate Dan's visits here. We'll do it again Tuesday. And yeah, if it's a W, the Chiefs will feel a lot better. And if they go 0-2, everything would be fine, but we can, freak out about it in the meantime. All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll digest some of what Dan says. We get, some news here on Aaron Rodgers' injury. No surprise, it's what we suspected. We'll talk about that. What does that mean for the overall AFC picture now? Because the Bills still lost that game with Zach Wilson basically playing the whole way with no time to game plan for it. We'll talk about it all. Sports Daily rolls forward on a Tuesday next. News is confirmed. Aaron Rodgers' torn Achilles this season is officially over. The question now will be, what about next season? Remember, Rodgers is under contract. We just heard, that Jim Rome audio, which is, a couple days in the past now. Everything flies out the window if Rodgers gets hurt. That's, it is. And while that sounds obvious, I don't know about everybody else, Tommy. Welcome back into Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. I haven't even considered it, which shame on me for a 40-year-old quarterback. Like, I haven't thought about what if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. Like, it hasn't even crossed my mind.
Yeah, I think he's done. Honestly, I mentioned that at the very top of the show. The reason for that is that, number one, he's going to be 40 years old in December, and coming back from an Achilles injury like that's difficult when you're 25.
It takes time.
Much less being 40 years old. This is also a guy that had to go on like a 4-day darkness retreat to decide if he even wanted to play this coming season. And he was fully healthy when he made that decision. So I'm just not sure that, he's going to want to. And I know that he's a very prideful guy. And I know that he's the ultimate consummate professional and competitive guy. Like, I get all of that. But man, he's 40. He's 40. That's a really, really difficult rehab. And it took a lot of convincing for him to even come back and play fully healthy this year. So
I do think he's fully committed, though. Like, I think the difference in Aaron Rodgers before he made the decision and after has been pretty apparent. Like, he does seem rejuvenated. I don't know. We know how hard it is for a basketball player to come back from an Achilles, or a running back. A quarterback, it's the plant. But they're not, especially Aaron Rodgers, like, he's not going to be running around. So I don't know that there's no like urgency to get that answer today, other than if the Jets are going to make any sort of decision to like make a trade or do whatever, they do need to begin to think about that stuff now, probably. It sounds like, based on, all the reporting now, that they are just going to roll with Garrett Wilson. Boy, he just doesn't look good, Tommy.
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, Zach Wilson. I really need them to get different names. Yeah, Garrett Wilson we love. Zach Wilson, not so much. Zach Wilson, he just doesn't look like he's going to be able to keep a defense honest. And it's like, that's all this team needs. And, so like, if I'm the Jets too, like, you got to have conversations, big picture, about what to do at the position. Like, do you go, because you've got so many good young players, like, could you trade everything for the opportunity to get Caleb Williams? Would anybody even make that trade? Like, are you thinking that way? Are you thinking about continuing to try and like find stopgap measures? Is there anybody out there that's buried? Man, again, like, revisionist history, but boy, it would have made sense for them to go trade for Trey Lance, right? Like, you just like, man, like, what about? But there are players out there, I think, that can do a better job this year than Zach Wilson. That's it. That's the short-term reality. And, I don't know how willing teams are to give up those types of players, because they have them for a reason. Off the street, everyone keeps bringing up like Matt Ryan, and I'm like, Matt Ryan with a bad offensive line doesn't make any sense at all to me. Like, I need like, Gardner Minshew, or like, who's just sort of, who's just sort of a grinder who can move around a little bit and make some shot plays, because nobody's going to come in there and throw it 35 times a game. I don't think. Like, they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to play good defense. They just need, it's pretty much who can get Garrett Wilson a few opportunities a game to make big plays.
And I'm more and more and more of the belief that really, I think it's Zach Wilson. And again, out of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, he might be number 32, right?
But bad.
But I think that if you go out and you get a low risk veteran like an Andy Dalton or a Matt Ryan, a Joe Flacco,
I love Andy Dalton. The idea of Andy Dalton makes a ton of sense.
But he's not going to be a run around kind of guy either. I mean, the thing about any of those guys, low risk, is that you bring them in basically as a low risk insurance policy for Zach Wilson. You let Zach Wilson maybe throw the ball 20 times a game, and maybe even less than that. And you lean heavily on Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. You pray to God that those two guys stay healthy throughout the entire season. You've got a two-headed monster at running back. You let Zach Wilson throw short and intermediate passes 15 to 20 times a game to Garrett Wilson. Basically, that's it. And then you lean on the defense. You try to control the ball. That's really the recipe. It's not to try to go out there and, find another mediocre quarterback that can be the starter this season for the Jets. I think it's Zach Wilson. I really do. And the bottom line is that the Jets really feel like Zach Wilson could have been a reclamation project for him. If they didn't feel like he was that way, they wouldn't have brought him back this year to back up Aaron Rodgers. I think they felt like, okay, with the mentoring of Aaron Rodgers, maybe he can develop into something serviceable long-term. They threw him to the Lions' den very early in his career. So if you bring in another veteran to help him along, then maybe he can be a little bit better than what we've seen in the past. He's not going to be a good quarterback. I'm not trying to say he's going to be this incredible quarterback, but if you package him in the right way, I think that you can find a way to still have success this season with this team the way that it's built.
I think that they can do better. That's the thing. Like, I think that they can get better at the position, and they are good enough that they need to try. Here's what I would do if I was the Jets. I would call Jerry Jones right now and say, you've got 3 quarterbacks. You need 2. We need 1. Like, let us overpay for either Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. Because for me, like, look at what Cooper Rush did last year. Think about a guy like Cooper Rush. He was, I mean, there were a lot of people at times last year, and I wasn't one of these people. They were like, man, maybe he should be in there over Dak. I didn't think that, but he certainly handled himself. And Tommy, the reason a guy like that would make sense to me is because he's in a very similar situation in New York that he was in Dallas, right? We need somebody that can give CeeDee Lamb a chance. We're going to run the crap out of the ball, and we're going to play good defense. Like that Cooper Rush, that's his MO. Like the Jets aren't all that dissimilar from the Cowboys, honestly. So, hey, guys, you traded for Trey Lance. Like, I know he's just like your emergency quarterback. Like, would you be willing to like let us overpay you for Cooper Rush? Or you just traded a 4th for Trey Lance. We'll give you a 2nd. Like, upgrade your draft. Like,
I don't think they need to go. I don't think they need to panic that way. Keep in mind, the Jets still have to send a draft pick to the Packers. It's going to be a 2nd-round pick because Aaron Rodgers had to play 65% of the snaps for them to send a 1st-round pick. But if you're already sending the Packers a 2nd-round draft pick for Aaron Rodgers, who's not playing, why would you send another draft pick to a team like the Cowboys or whoever in exchange for a backup quarterback? You wouldn't do that.
Well, because I think that you said they're not desperate. I think they should be desperate. They just beat the Bills with Zach Wilson.
There are enough serviceable free agent quarterbacks out there
maybe
that you can sign without giving up additional draft capital to make that happen. I don't see a trade that involves draft
do you
picks
think anybody
happening at all for the Jets right now.
Do you think anybody out there as just a free agent like that is a better option though?
Yes.
Than Cooper Rush?
Yeah, I do. I think if you went to go sign, I want to be very clear. I don't think these guys are good quarterbacks, but if you go out and you sign a Joe Flacco, for instance, who is on the bench, right? Like he's not even with the team right now to back up Zach Wilson. I think it depends on what you're trying to use this quarterback for. I think what you're saying is that making a trade for another quarterback to come in and start over Zach Wilson is kind of the direction that you're looking at. I'm looking at signing a low-risk veteran to back up and mentor Zach Wilson this season. I think that's the big distinction, right? Okay.
Colt McCoy, Colt McCoy is a decent option, maybe.
Yeah.
I
would, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm maybe offering Blaine Gabbert as an option, not for a draft pick, but
no, see, and here's the problem with the Cowboys. And I said that hypothetical, the Cowboys aren't going to make that trade. The Chiefs wouldn't make that trade. Here's why this is a problem for the Jets. Those teams have invested in that position for a reason. And so, like the backup position, I mean, for a reason. And that's because they could find themselves in the same situation the Jets are in right now. So that's where it's going to get real tricky, right? Like you have to find a team that's rebuilding and not very good and is, aware of that, who's got a decent backup. Because I don't think any good teams with a good backup are going to make a trade like that. The only interesting thing about the Cowboys is they obviously brought in Trey Lance now. I'm more interested in the upside of Trey Lance than I am of Zach Wilson. Okay. Like because at least at that point he can run. Like worst case scenario trade, just run, like do whatever, whatever you got to do. So I don't know. I agree that probably the best short-term answer is to go find the open market and who's still available, right? Like where is, I don't even know the answer to this. I'm going to look it up right now. Where is Jacoby Brissett right now? Like, what is he doing? He is
the Browns still, isn't
he's
he?
the Commanders.
Commanders. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So I want Jacoby Brissett. That's what I want because we know he's good enough.
Maybe you make a phone call to the Lions and say, look, you've got Teddy Bridgewater as your backup, and you've also got Hendon Hooker. So maybe you don't need Teddy Bridgewater and you want to roll with Hendon Hooker as your guy as a backup.
I don't know if Teddy Two Gloves is I need somebody that can give Garrett Wilson a chance. I just that's my problem is I don't know if Zach Wilson can do that. That's why Flacco is moderately, and Flacco's obviously played for the Jets plenty, but so I don't think they'd go back down that road, or they could have still had him there. I don't know. I think the Zach Wilson story is so intriguing, but I just don't see it. He looks as bad as quarterbacks look in football ever in the NFL. Like he just doesn't look like he has it. And I don't know how he's going to find it because it's not just him making mental mistakes, Tommy. He doesn't physically look like he can make the throws to me. And which is mind-boggling.
That's why I think that if you're going to roll with him, and again, maybe you roll with him for the next few weeks and see if there's a way that you can protect him and package him and make it look like he can be serviceable. If it doesn't work, then maybe at that point you try to go and figure out something before the trade deadline. But I think that if you're going to, like, in the short term roll with him, again, you lean heavily on the run game. You give him a few opportunities to get the ball to Garrett Wilson, but that's basically it. And then you lean on the defense. I think that's what they should do in the short term. And again, if you get closer to the trade deadline and it just doesn't look like it's going to work, then maybe you try to make a trade at that point. But the other thing that I want to point out, and I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, if the Jets didn't feel like Zach Wilson could at least be something for them, they wouldn't have kept him this offseason. Remember, they had
White go probably.
Right. They had Mike White. Like they wouldn't have let Mike White walk. But they did, and he went to the Dolphins. Like, I mean, they didn't feel like they had something in Zach Wilson. They wouldn't.
The amazing catch for Wilson was it was a terrible throw. Like that's the thing. Yeah. That was a 5-yard pass, and it was bad. So I don't know. They're good enough, Tommy. They're good enough to be contenders. They beat the Bills.
I still think they're good enough to be contenders right now without Aaron Rodgers.
To win a Super Bowl, though?
No. But contenders to at least be a playoff team right now without Aaron Rodgers. They didn't have him last year. And if Breece Hall doesn't go down with a torn ACL, they might be playoff bound last season. So I don't think at this point you can panic and throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think you lean on the strengths that the team has, and that's the running game and the defense. I think they're going to be okay without going out and making some kind of blockbuster deal.
I mean, Tom Brady's the top option, right? We can all agree on that. Yeah. I just don't think Brady, with that line, the questions on that line, I'm not sure how good a fit that is. But, man, that is the option, right? That's the choice. I would rather have Jacoby Brissett. I would rather have Jameis Winston. And then explore maybe into free agency. I think I'd rather have Carson Wentz, to be perfectly honest with you. I know he's really struggled, but maybe I hope I'm wrong. Here's the other. I hope I'm wrong about Zach Wilson because again, I love good stories, and man, is that a story. And his attitude has, like his body language, his attitude, all of that last night was off the charts. So that's the most interesting option. But I definitely don't think it's the best option here on September 12th for the Jets. All right, we'll come back. More Sports Daily. On the way out, Jad, let's give away some HTO. Let's give away some free iced tea cards here. So these will be good for HTO at either Wichita location in East Wichita at 21st to 127th, West Wichita at 13th and Tyler. And exciting news, there is a Derby HTO coming on Friday. These cards will be good for our friends down in Derby as well. 2 of them, iced tea More than 25 flavors. Either you're a fan or you haven't been in yet. They'll be good either way. 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. Jad will get us a winner. We'll be back with more Sports Daily. Congratulations to Kent for winning some HTO. Visit us at 2 Wichita locations and coming Friday in Derby. Good to hear from our buddy Virgil on social media. Haven't heard from Virgil in a while. Hope all's well, Virgil. Big Ravens fan. Says, what about Tyler Huntley? Good option. Points out that the Ravens kept Josh Johnson because he knows the new offense well. I'll trust Virgil on that. I will say, one, again, I don't think good teams are interested in giving up their insurance policies. And in a situation like the Ravens, and this is going to make it complicated too, there's no chance if I'm an AFC contender, I want the Jets to be better based on what I saw last night. Like, I don't want to do anything to potentially give the Jets any sort of edge because they're good enough to beat Buffalo in a game where, boy, like emotionally and strategically, they were lost. Clearly, they're still good enough. If Breece Hall's all the way back now with Dalvin Cook to help out there too, and that defense and all these things, like, again, like, are the Jets contenders to win a Super Bowl? I don't think they are with Zach Wilson, but they're certainly capable of beating anybody at any point. And so, and that's, like, if I'm a team like the Ravens, I'm like, no. We don't want them to be bad.
Right. And that's why I mentioned in the last segment that, you lean on the running game and the defense. Had Breece Hall not torn his ACL a year ago, they probably were playoff bound. And that was with Zach Wilson as the quarterback.
They were almost playoff bound anyway.
So I don't think that they are. I don't think that there's a time to panic. It is a letdown. It's super disappointing, devastating, all of that, to lose Aaron Rodgers like you did. But I don't think that it's a situation to panic at this point right now.
They're panicking. They're panicking because Aaron Rodgers is gone for the year. But what I think they are in a position, though, to be like overly aggressive because they're good. It would be different if you didn't feel like, man, this roster is good enough. We just need a little bit more there. But I think they might be there, Tommy. Like, we saw Cincinnati struggle. Buffalo obviously struggled. Kansas City struggled. I don't think Baltimore struggled, but that was closer probably than it should have been for just a minute there in the AFC. The Steelers look like garbage. Like, the Jags look good.
I'm not sure that there's not a more formidable team in that division today after the Aaron Rodgers injury and the Bills loss than the Miami Dolphins.
Well, sure.
And what Tua and Tyreek did on Sunday against the Chargers was absolutely impressive.
They also gave up a whole lot of points, though.
True.
And so
they did. But they've got Vic Fangio running the defense down there. So you would think that that's going to be
over time
locked up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Their talent level isn't super high.
I feel like after that Monday night game, you lose Aaron Rodgers if you're the Jets, but I think also if you're the Bills, you've got some legitimate concerns about Josh Allen. And we know the kind of talent level that Josh Allen possesses, but man, he makes some stupid decisions and stupid mistakes. He's done it throughout his entire career, but it was on full display last night.
It was, but I don't have any concerns about Josh Allen. You just have to understand what Josh Allen is. Josh Allen is akin to Brett Favre.
Allen,
right?
I was going to say Josh Allen is today's version of Brett Favre. Like, he's got the huge arm, but he makes some terrible decisions.
He does, but that's a part of his game because he also makes a lot of incredible plays by risk taking too. Like, if he never made big plays based on these risks he took, that would be one thing. But I think you count on, and look, last night didn't go their way, but they also have a good enough defense to allow him to take some of those risks too. All the credit in the world goes to the Jets defensively last night. Like, I think last night, and again, this is as we look at the AFC here for just like a minute or two, I don't want to overreact to the Chiefs because I don't think that that's the right thing to do, or the Bengals or the Bills. Like, I think all three of those teams by the end of this season will still be, the cream of the crop. This is the NFL. There is not a league that exists that teaches us every week not to overreact to what we saw the week before, like the NFL. It's why it's impossible to bet. It's impossible to predict. Like, it is the wildest league in the world. It's what we all love about it. I 1 weekend, who do I think the top three teams are in the AFC still? The Chiefs, the Bills, and the Bengals. Like, I'm not wavering from that. It's more about the Jets, the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Jags, are they all closer to those three than we thought? That I do think is absolutely possible. That's what we'll see, I think, over the next couple of weeks. All right, we'll come back. We'll put a bow on this show today, man, I cannot still get over that drama last night, and just sucks, man. I hate it that Rodgers is gone for the year. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network today next. All right, that's it, everybody. Albracht and Castor in an eventful Tuesday. Following us, Jim Rome at 11 before Bob and Jeff take over, 2 to 4 o'clock. It's no Aaron Rodgers. We're done with that. The Royals, by the way, I said 2 to 4. It's 2 to 3 because the Royals play a doubleheader today against the White Sox. That coverage begins right here at 3 o'clock. For Jad Chambers, congratulations to all our winners, and Tommy Castor. I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll see you Wednesday.